how it works out.
I do. It sucks.
How long have you had it?
Since June.
We do? We need to sit, but we'll get started in a minute.
So, if you don't mind,
Uh-huh. Okay. So if he doesn't show up, then I'll just go and then do
yeah.
as many as I can get done. What?
It's also difficult. They said they can hear the conversations of you, but you are muted, so it shouldn't be muted. That makes no sense. There's fine. Call me.
How do you how do you count five, Tom? She's not on the I'm good.
Happy
How
New
are
Year.
you? Happy New Year.
Hey Tom, how are you?
Absolutely.
Happy New Good.
Good.
It's a good year.
It is a good year.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, here's hoping
Okay. And then you're going over to this other subcommittee meeting afterwards? I think they're trying to, I think that there's an effort here to just kind of stretch things out until 2014. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay, now we have five.
I see Ron Shea, but I don't see any of the other charter school advocates out there yet.
Do you know if the sergeants are calling? Are you guys calling members? Are they calling? They don't have any hints of the next person that's going to show up?
Not that they could give me, no.
Okay. Yes.
I kept you waiting, Madam Chair.
Good afternoon. We're going to begin today's hearing. We have one bill that has been pulled for today's hearing, AB 1070. So that leaves us today with 5 bills to be heard, and we actually have a quorum, so we will have the secretary call the roll.
Brownlee?
Here.
Brownlee here, Norby? Here. Norby here, Amiano? Here. Amiano here, Buchanan? Butler? Carter? Carter here, Ames? Gaines? Halderman? Here. Halderman here, Wagner? Here. Wagner here, Williams.
Great, we have a quorum, and so we will begin with Mr. Solorio's bill, AB 1166, which is item 2 in your agenda. Nope, is it item 2? No, it's item 3. Whoops, item 3 in your agenda. It says item 2 here.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Happy New Year.
Test scores, I believe, is just wrong. This bill, AB 1166, would clarify that a school cannot include any information on a student identification card or any other object that a student is required to carry at school that reflects their performance on standardized tests or course grades. The catalyst for this bill was reporting that 2 high schools in Anaheim had a program requiring students to carry student IDs and notebook planners in the color that reflected how well they performed on the prior year STAR test. Students who scored advanced in all subject test areas received black or platinum ID cards. Students who scored proficient or improved a certain amount from the prior year received a gold card. Students who did not score proficient or did not improve by a certain amount received white ID cards and notebooks. Students with black and platinum cards received free admission to home athletic events, as well as discounts to school dances and local businesses. Gold card holders received free admission to certain athletic events, as well as certain discounts. White card holders received no benefits, and of most offense to me, they were required to stand in a longer, separate cafeteria line. And often at the end of the line, there was no food. While the schools initially defended that program, stating that it did incentivize students, students and parents complained the program was embarrassing and demoralizing. CDE believes that student privacy rights were violated. However, the principal at one of the schools defended the program, stating that the program was intentionally designed to obscure specific student exam performance scores and therefore did not violate state law. And that's why we need this law to clarify the law. Finally, I would also like to note that I am accepting the chair's recommendation to strike encourage from the bill on page 2, line 5. Thank you, and I ask for your aye vote.
Which has a support on this bill. I am not going to support. I'll probably lay off for a couple of reasons, but let me ask a couple of questions and see if I can flesh out what's going on here. My initial problem is that I have a problem with the underlying policy. To me, it makes absolutely no sense that we should not encourage and do what we can to encourage students to do better on their tests. And one way that happens is if they are rewarded for their achievements. I guess my question would be, does this bill do away with dean's lists or honors societies or valedictorians? Don't all of those things show a student how they've done, and more importantly, show other students, there are good consequences to doing well.
You know,
What's
that's
the distinction?
That's a very good question, and you know, you highlighted, I think, some programs that are very appropriate, as well as tests that are ongoing where a student can achieve and do well case by case. Under this bill, all the programs that you talked about could continue. What this bill really clarifies is those things that a student is required to carry on them at all times. For example, a student ID card or a notebook planner, if they're required to be carried on you for entire school year, that type of you know, branding is a little too much, and that really is indicative of, again, probably what's the most offensive for me is the cases where the students are struggling. So you, for the course of a year, you know, stigmatize somebody by having a colored card. That's number one. But two, the incentives with it, you know, to, you know, say that, you know, you student that is not proficient, you're going to be in this longer cafeteria line. You know, that to me just kind of steps out of what I believe is reasonable.
Can you put the kids in the dean's list at the front of the line?
What's that?
Can you put the kids on the dean's list at the front of the lunch
I don't know
line?
if any schools do that.
I don't know if any schools do that either. Can you do it under your bill?
Under my
And why
bill,
not?
This bill does not cover, you know, honors students. The thing too about honors students or AP students, those have an opt-in opportunity. You have students, they can decide if they want to apply to be in an honors class or an AP class. So students have that opportunity, and then based off how they do in those classes, you know, they may get an A, they may get a B, they may get, you know, another grade, but there are opt-in provisions, whereas to require somebody to have something on them at all times and have those disparity in the type of incentives, again, the students and the parents at this school, like myself, felt that it was embarrassing and demoralizing.
How many other schools do programs like this?
Well, there's those two schools. We haven't taken any type of inventory up and down the state, but the assembly analysis does note that there are some that use grades and factors of grades in representing the grades on their ID cards. So there's at least, you know, a handful.
Does your bill outlaw that?
Grades or standardized tests on IDs or anything else that is required to be on a student year long. Everything else would be allowed.
What can a school do to reward a student who has worked hard, achieved higher than some of the other students, to encourage and reward that behavior that doesn't run afoul of your bill?
Everything that you mentioned, it could be a party, it could be, you know, a free game, anything, as long as they're not required to have something on their body or carried, you know, on their body that represents how they did on a test or their grades.
Well, standing at the end of the lunch line isn't something that's on their body that they're required to carry, but that's covered by your bill, right?
No,
the lunch line is outlawed. You can't.
Not with an ID card or a required planner. There could be some other way that they do an incentive for that.
I mean, Mr. Wagner, I think this bill is specifically about the ID card or any other object. So it's
So the
about
lunch
that.
line, the lunch line is still. You can still put the students who do poorly on the standardized tests at the
They
back.
could. I would hope not, but they could.
Okay,
could.
And clarify that. Okay, I'm done for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Halderman?
Thanks, Mr. Solorio. I think this was one of the weirder practices I've ever heard of at a high school, and I was delighted to learn that 3 months ago, the district in which these two schools, Cypress and Kennedy, reside, discontinued the practice.
You know,
I'm not sure this bill is required.
You know, I would add, because I've met with them, you know, a few times, including during December. They've discontinued most of it. They still have some of the discounts in place, and they currently have a task force looking to see what are appropriate incentive programs. And they were very happy to see the language in this bill, I think, because it provides some specifics on, you know, what might be, you know, an appropriate way to provide a defining line.
Given the fact that they've discontinued the behavior, the requirement to carry a color-coded card, I don't see the necessity for the bill, but I appreciate your thoughtfulness.
Okay, thank you. there are other schools again with similar programs, and definitely we spoke about Anaheim, but this is happening at other places as well.
Mr. Amiano.
Yeah, just speaking as a teacher, I have no problem with rewarding and motivating and incentives, but to me this reminds me of the old practice of wearing a dunce cap and for public humiliation, and that is not what learning is about. In fact, it's not even conducive to learning. So I applaud your effort here, at least at exposing what I think is a very, very a dangerous precedent. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Mr. Norby.
I was trying to think of an analogy in the adult world, and the best I could come up with just up here would be if a person could prove they had a higher level of voting in elections, that they'd get a different colored driver's license. So the police officer would know, you're voting in all the elections, and I'll let you out of the ticket, or I'll let you at the front of the line when you go to the DMV or something like that. And certainly we do want to encourage people. We want to encourage people to vote, but the reward ought to be connected with some kind of nexus. We want to encourage kids to get good grades, but things like this, I don't know if they really motivate the kids. I mean, what really motivates them is their parents at home that want them to get good grades, getting into a good college, things like making a lot more money in their lives, maybe further on than a different colored notebook, but I think provide enough motivation. When this thing first came out, I think that the schools were humiliated into dropping it. I think the Anaheim Union High School Board looked at it as well. I think local school boards are probably capable of dealing with this. So it may not be necessary, but I do support the bill because it happened, I know, in your part of the county. This is in the part of a new district that I'll hopefully soon be representing in La Palma and West Anaheim with these two high schools. So I'm happy to support the bill, Assemblyman Solorio. And I would echo the comments of my colleague to the left here that this was one of the more bizarre things I'd ever read in terms of rewards. What sometimes seems like a good idea to a principal in his office sometimes has to be vetted, and it's been vetted. It may not come back, but if it does, your bill is ready to deal with it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hearing no other comments, I would just like to add that I think this is a very good bill and a necessary bill, really, to clarify students' protections and that information is not on their student ID cards. And so I think it's really very important, and to single out students based on their academic performance for basic services at school is just, in my opinion, is just really not okay. So I really appreciate you responding to what's happened, I believe, in your district, correct? And I think this will really clear things up for the future. So I'm very supportive. The bill. Would you like to make any closing comments?
Just a brief close. Again, this bill's needed because here you had a situation where the Department of Education felt this was in violation of the law, yet you had the locals feeling it wasn't in violation of the law. This provides the clarity of what is and what isn't appropriate. And, like all you, I want kids to get better grades. I want them to strive. I want incentive programs. But when there occurs a situation when there's ongoing branding that humiliates a student, I don't think that's good for the kid or good for the environment. So I ask for your vote.
Thank you very much. And the motion is due pass as amended. And will the secretary call the roll?
Brownlee?
Aye.
Brownlee, aye. Norby?
Aye.
Norby, aye. Amiano? Aye. Amiano, aye. Buchanan? Butler? Aye. Butler, aye. Carter? Aye. Carter, aye. Ing? Aye. Ing, aye. Gaines? Aye. Gaines, aye. Halderman? No. Halderman, no. Wagner?
Not voting.
Wagner, not voting. Williams? Okay, 3, 6, 7, it's out.
That's 7 votes. Your bill's out.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next author is Mr. Mendoza, AB 1172, and that is item 4 in our packets. Welcome, Mr. Mendoza.
Madam Chair, members. I'm here to present 1172, AB 1172, a bill that will give school district the authority to deny a charter school petition on the basis of financial impact. I would like to begin by accepting the committee's amendments as they appear in your analysis, which are a school district can deny a charter based on a negative declaration, certification, repeal the piece asking for districts to demonstrate fiscal distress through specific standards. A district can deny a charter if it has received an emergency loan, and we're deleting the study. And we're also we have worked out one additional amendment yesterday relating to school districts with declining enrollment that need to close one of their schools. The new amendment would state that if this district is currently in positive financial standing, but approving a charter would push them over the edge into qualified status, then the district can deny the petition. This cleaner, narrow version of AB 1172 asks members to consider what is best for kids. Is it a promise for future innovation and choice, or is it manageable class sizes and a high school or a high school nurse? We elect people to make the decision. Those are the people at the school board level. And with me here today to speak on behalf of the bill, we have my co-author, Assemblywoman Susan Bonilla. We also have Aaron Rosander, the superintendent of the Mariposa County Unified School District, and Stephen Lawrence, the superintendent of the Mount Diablo Unified School District. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bonilla, welcome.
Thank you, and I'll be very brief. I just want to be clear that this is not a bill that is against charter schools. I think that charter schools have a tremendous role to play. This is about a local authority of school boards. This is about transparency on all our financial issues and allowing decisions to be made with as much information as possible before our local school boards regarding the finances and their impacts. I think it's important to let the superintendents speak and give their perspectives from the local level, but also just want to say that as chair of the Education Budget Finance Subcommittee, when we see our school districts in such financial distress and they are now so fragile, that it's very, very important to consider what their current financial status is when they're considering a charter application.
Thank you. And before the witnesses begin, our House rules here are 2 witnesses and support, and then others who also support the bill to state their name and organization, and roughly 5 minutes for support and 5 minutes for oppose. So please proceed. Witnesses and support.
Hi, I'm Aaron Rosander, Superintendent of Schools for Mariposa County Unified School District. Madam Chair, members, I appreciate the time to speak before you today. In school year 2010-11, 2 schools were closed in Mariposa County Unified School District due to financial distress. Closures helped to move Mariposa County Unified School District out of negative certification and into positive. One of the schools closed was located south of Mariposa proper. In October of this year, a charter was created which will take this very site that was closed south of Mariposa and will take the revenue from Mariposa County Unified School District to that charter. This plunges Mariposa County Unified School District directly back into negative certification. The net effect is that the opening of the charter is having a deleterious effect on the school district, but most importantly, a deleterious effect on our students. We now face the removal of programs at our comprehensive high school. Music, counseling, and other activities are now currently being proposed to be removed from our one and only comprehensive high school in the county. A through G classes for UC CSU student eligibility is now at risk, and we're very, very concerned and alarmed at this. Finally, the charter that's been proposed will appeal to a clientele of high wealth. Thus, the district is left with a clientele of lesser wealth, with lesser resource to fund programs. And so we urge you to support this very bill on behalf of our students.
Thank you, sir. Next witness.
Yes, Stephen Lawrence, Mount Diablo Unified School District. Again, very much appreciate your time this afternoon. We are in the process, or the county's in the process of reviewing a conversion charter high school. The law stipulates that in a unified school district, the unified school district has to pay the charter, conversion charter high school, the difference between the unified rate, which is $52.06, and the high school rate, which is $61.49. So the school district becomes obligated for that extra approximately $1,000 per pupil to pay to a conversion charter high school. This afternoon, I brought my principal, Bill Moronis from Ignacio Valley High School, which is one of our lower socioeconomic schools in the district. What currently would occur is funding from our lower socioeconomic schools would be moved to our higher socioeconomic school under the current guidelines of a conversion charter. This would allow us to consider that in our decision-making process as our school board looks at the overall impact on the children of the school district if this language is changed. So this afternoon, we definitely encourage you to do that because we think currently it does not represent, especially our lower socioeconomic kids in our school district well.
Thank you, sir. Next witness. You still have some more time on the clock, so.
Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members. My name is Bill Moronis, and I am the principal at Ignacio Valley High School in Concord, California. Our school is quite diverse. 60% of our students live at or below the poverty level. They're on free and reduced lunches. And what that means is a family of 4 living at $24,000 or less a year. Also, we have 60% of our students which are English language learners. And for the majority of them, English is not the first language spoken in their home. With the approval of a conversion charter high school to our district, it has a negative impact on all of our students. It has an impact of $141 per student. For me as a principal, that means that I have to cut $180,000 out of my budget. And for me, that's 2.5 teachers, or many programs to help and support our English language learners and our students that are living at or below the poverty level. And this money would be transferred to a school in an affluent area where these students do have the support that my students don't have at home. So I urge you for your support on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, the next witness, if you'll state your name and the organization you represent and your position on the bill.
My name is Stephen Acatino. I am the Director of Instrumental Music at Ignacio Valley High School, and I support this bill because our program is going to lose a lot next year if the charter school goes through.
Thank you, sir. Next witness.
Madam Chair and members, Seth Bramble on behalf of the California Teachers Association, proud to sponsor this important legislation. Urge your aye vote.
Thank you. Next witness in support.
Harold Boyd, United Teachers Los Angeles, co-sponsor of the bill. And as someone said, this is not an anti-public charter school bill.
Thank you very much. Next witness.
Jennifer Moreno with the California Federation of Teachers, and we are in support.
Thank you. Next witness.
Brian Rivas on behalf of the California School Boards Association, also in support.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support of Mr. Mendoza's bill? Witnesses in opposition? Welcome.
Madam Chair and members, I was waiting for my army to show up. Thank you, Jennifer, for being I always feel so lonely. Rand Martin on behalf of the California Charter Schools Association. First off, we do want to acknowledge and appreciate the fact that the bill is a much narrower version of the bill from what you first heard last spring, and we appreciate the changes that have been made. Unfortunately, we still must oppose it because it gets to a core principle that the charter schools have had since 1992 when the Charter Schools Act was first enacted. And that is that decisions on petitions for a charter school need to be based on educational soundness, on the pedagogy, on the capacity of the petitioners to actually provide the services that they have claimed that they will provide, and not on the fiscal impact on the school district. Fiscal impact has never been a consideration, an overt consideration in a decision about the charter schools. The analysis is correct that there was a change in 1998 that shifted the burden of proof, but that did not change the fact that the core principles about what can and cannot be the reason for approving a charter school have not changed much in 20 years. We appreciate also, and just had a very substantive conversation with Ms. Bonilla about this, we appreciate the fragility of the fiscal situation for all of us. Charter schools are having the same problems, in many cases different problems and worse problems than traditional public schools. So we appreciate that. But again, these are not, this is a current situation that we hope we are all growing out of. The governor has put more money in the budget, which we hope will be sustained next year, and more money in subsequent years. So unfortunately, a change now would be permanent for charter schools, even though the fiscal situation may change. We also want to point out that there are practical considerations as well. The decision about a charter school that's based on a fiscal argument would be based from the school district's perspective on numbers that at this point cannot necessarily be verified. School districts do not do site-based budgeting. They do not do site-based expenditure reporting. So knowing what the fiscal impact on a particular school site would be if that school converts to a charter school is not based on numbers that anybody can verify. We would argue that in many cases there could be a savings. I'm not saying that that would be the case in all. In many cases, there would the difference between what the traditional school is costing and what the charter school is costing would not necessarily be a huge difference. So we're concerned that the numbers that we're basing this on are not verifiable. Again, a conversation with Ms. Bonilla about the need for transparency in budgeting is important for all of us, but needs to come first before policy changes are made that totally undermine or substantially undermine what we're doing. I do want to point out one other issue that we actually agree with. The gentleman from Mount Diablo raised the point, I think, relative to the Clayton Valley High School situation recently, that there is sort of a disconnect between the USD, the Unified School District blended rate and the high school rate that a charter school would receive. And yes, it does work out so that the school district is disadvantaged in a situation like that. We agree that that needs to be fixed. We actually supported legislation several years ago that did become law that former Senator Migden carried that attempted to fix that. Unfortunately, the fix was worse than the problem, and we had to repeal it several years later. But we still remain committed to fixing that problem. And if that's what this bill was about, we'd be sitting down with Mr. Mendoza and Ms. Bonilla and looking for a solution to that particular problem. But to fix it by changing a core principle about fiscal impact on charter schools is not the way to go about this issue. And so for those reasons, we'd urge you to oppose this bill today. Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness in opposition.
Jennifer Wada on behalf of Ed Voice. We're opposed for the reasons stated by the Charter School Association.
Thank you. Next witness.
Bron Shea Jones on behalf of K-12 and Charter School Capital. First, I want to thank the author for sitting down with us. We've had ongoing discussions. We've tried to come to some set of amendments we might be able to agree to, so I appreciate him and his staff putting that effort forth. But we're still opposed to the bill because we haven't got to that point yet. So for those reasons that were stated earlier, we're opposed and ask you to vote against it.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in opposition? Questions or discussion, members? Dr. Haldeman.
I think there's a parallel here to something that was done legislatively a couple of times, and that was the cuts to Medi-Cal rates. The courts ruled twice that to do so based on fiscal impact alone did not take into account the needs of the Californians served by that program. If we are considering fiscal needs alone of the school district, but not also requiring academics, what is the dynamic of the specific charter school request, I'm not sure that's any different. And I would be very curious about a legal opinion on that.
Okay. Any other members? Mr. Amiano.
I move the bill.
Is there a second on the bill? Ms. Butler seconds the bill. So there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? I think, Mr. Mendoza, you, as you stated in your presentation, you're accepting all 5 of the amendments stated in the analysis and the additional piece that we just worked out between yesterday and today. And I think this bill now is set up really to be as objective as possible in terms of recognizing what the fiscal, in terms of defining the fiscal distress of a district in this particular situation. So I will be supporting the bill today, and the motion is do pass as amended. Mr. Williams.
I just wanted to thank the author and the sponsors for engaging. I, too, voted against it last time because I felt like the criteria was too subjective, but feel that the amendments that you made it very objective criteria. And so I appreciate the engagement, and I think this is much better public policy, and I think this is the right thing to do to give in extremely distressed districts sort of a let's not rock the boat anymore at this point in time. So thank you.
Mr. Mendoza, would you like to close?
Madam Chair, I just want to thank you and your staff for doing a great job working with us. I really appreciate the help, and thank my principal co-author, Ms. Bonilla, for her help and from her office, and just respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you very much. Will the Secretary call the roll?
Brownlee?
Aye.
Brownlee, aye. Norby? Amiano? Aye. Amiano, aye. Buchanan? Buchanan, aye. Butler? Aye. Butler, aye. Carter? Carter, aye. Ing? Ing, aye. Gaines? Gaines, no. Alderman? No. Alderman, no. Wagner? No. Wagner, no. Williams? Aye. Williams, aye.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members.
That bill, how many votes? 7 votes. That bill is out. No, we were just finding a replacement for you. She weren't here.
We're starting with AB 331, right?
Correct.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. This bill was introduced as a placeholder bill for the next education bond at an informational hearing held by this committee and the Senate Education Subcommittee on Sustainable School Facilities last November. The Office of Public School Construction predicts that we will run out of new construction and modernization funds within the next few months. We also concluded at that hearing that GO bonds is still the best source of funding for school facilities. While some districts have experienced declining enrollment, the Department of Finance continues to project an overall enrollment growth of 113,000 students over the next 8 years. School districts also continue to need modernization funds to ensure that children are in safe and healthy facilities. Local communities are passing local bonds with the expectation of getting matching state bond funds. I believe voters should be given the chance to consider another statewide bond. This is simply a vehicle to continue those discussions. The remaining part of the bill makes changes to the school facility program. Most of these were contained in last session's AB 220, which passed this committee with no votes in 2010. And those include clarifying a provision intended to authorize districts to make enrollment projections on a 10-year basis, and clarifying a provision intended to capture those facilities that were built completely with local funds. And with that, I respectfully ask the committee for an aye vote.
Those in favor of the bill?
Chairman, members, Tom Duffy for the Coalition for Adequate School Housing, the CASH organization. In 1982, the Assembly and the Senate in California and the governor approved the beginning of a long series of bonds that have established California school infrastructure as being a beacon for the rest of the United States. We believe that this bill continues that tradition and meets the needs of school districts in California and will do something I think very important at this time, and that is to create jobs. Just briefly, using the information that we have, $1 billion in school bonds would create 28,000 jobs, 14,000 from the $1 billion in the state bonds and $1 billion in local bonds, creating the other 14,000. We're talking about a significant add to the economy in California with this measure. We recognize that this is a difficult time for California. We understand what the governor's proposal in the budget means. We believe, and we thank Ms. Brownlee for her leadership in believing in this also, that we need to move forward with this measure because we will be depleted of funds in this calendar year. Thank you very much.
Others in support.
Jason Bryan on behalf of the California Building Industry Association. We too support the chairwoman's efforts to advance a school bond that would achieve two critical things, help us build new schools and modernize existing facilities. So we appreciate your efforts to keep the conversation moving forward, so we ask for your support as well.
Dave Walrath, representing Small School Districts Association. We also ask for your support on the bond. It addresses the state match and the ability to provide assistance to school districts, and it addresses the Serrano issue regarding access to wealth and potential wealth disparities if there's not a state program and a state match. Additionally, it addresses the Williams issues that were part of the state settlement on the state obligation to ensure adequate facilities for schools. For both those reasons, a continuation of state bond as we're running out of funds, be able to have the funds for the match, we support the bill.
Who else? Jump in, please.
Mike McGee with the State Chancellor's Office for California Community Colleges. We thank the author for this measure. We have a long history of supporting bond measures. Without a bond, our needs have continued to grow. We have significant modernization and new construction needs, and we look forward to this measure. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Brian Rivas on behalf of the California School Boards Association. Your staff analysis, I think, lays it out very clearly. We're just about out of bond authority. We still have a projected unmet need. We need a bond to support facilities at the K-12 level, and we'd like for the voters to have an opportunity to vote on it. So for those reasons, we're in support.
Thank you, Mark McDonald, on behalf of a number of local community college districts. Excuse me, Antelope Valley, Kern, Los Angeles, Glendale, Mount San Jacinto, Los Rios, and Yosemite, and all of the community college bond funds have been used or are already allocated. Our districts have projects on the Chancellor's Office list, and we need this bill in order to begin those projects. We thank the author for introducing this measure, and we're in strong support. Thank you.
Karen French, representing the University of California. We're in support of this measure, and we thank the author for recognizing the capital outlay needs of all of public education in the state. Thank you.
Eric Bakke with the Los Angeles Unified School District. We'd just like to thank the author for bringing this measure forward. We truly appreciate it. As I don't want to repeat the comments from the previous speakers, but after 12, 13 years of the program, I think this is an appropriate time to reevaluate how the program is working, and the efforts to streamline many of the programs are within the school facility program are very much needed and appreciated. Thank you.
Laura Preston, the Association of California School Administrators. We're in support.
Mr. Chairman and Committee, Bonnie Slauson, representing the Community College League, and I join our fellow higher education and K-12 representatives in supporting this measure and thank Assemblymember Brownlee for her continued support of education and especially helping us to build our facilities, which are much needed in the community colleges as addressed in your analysis. Thank you.
Monique Ramos on behalf of State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tom Torlakson, in support.
Jennifer Moreno with the California Federation of Teachers, and we are in support.
Good afternoon. Wes Larson, California State University. We look forward to working with the chairs as we have the conversation, and we ask for your aye vote.
Ana Ferreira on behalf of the County School Facilities Consortium and over 30 county offices of education across the state. We so appreciate this bill. County offices must house special ed, alternative ed, and other unique populations of students, and it is difficult. We very much appreciate the bill. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and members, Moira Top on behalf of the California Charter Schools Association. We don't actually have a position on the bill. We do appreciate the author's interest in advancing discussions on a school bond, and we look forward to having further discussions and ensuring that charter schools are a part of this school bond as they have been for the last 3 statewide bonds. Thank you.
Anyone else in support? Opposition?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members, David Wolf with the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. We're opposed to the bill. First of all, I'd want to apologize to the author and the committee for the late notice on the letter. I was just made aware of this bill a couple of days ago. And, Mr. Chairman,
a couple of days ago, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're minutes away.
It's true, and still hot off the copier, indeed. But, no, we're opposed to this bill, Mr. Chairman, mainly on fiscal grounds, sir. Our debt service ratio in the state of California, the amount of bond debt in relation to the general fund, is currently at 7%, and we would just make the argument and the point that that money going to pay off bond debt interest is not going to higher education, corrections, or other important services. And we should just be prudent, I think, in, especially when we have a $15 billion budget deficit, how we're spending our money. And I'd also like to make the committee aware that if I'm reading the Treasurer's website correctly, there's still $3 billion of Prop 1D money that has not been sold yet from 2006. And it's my understanding that most of that money, as Ms. Brownlee mentioned, has been allocated. But I think it's prudent that we should wait for these bonds to be sold before we go to the voters and start asking for more. So for those reasons, ask for a no vote.
Others in opposition? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman and members, Brendan Tuig on behalf of EdVoice. We have an opposed unless amended position based on the fact that the bill does not explicitly include charter schools. And the last 3 bonds have included resources for charter schools, and we'd like to have the bill be amended to recognize charter schools and make sure they get resources.
Anyone else? Questions, comments for the author? Yes.
If I read the analysis correctly, I know you're creating a vehicle that's going to be then amended, but clearly when you read the analysis, I think it's your intent to include funding for charter schools.
Yeah, I mean, there's no funding allocated for anyone
That's
at
exactly
this particular
right.
point in time, so there's equity across the board.
Right. So I know that EdVoice may hold off on supporting it till you actually see it in black and white, but I just wanted to clarify that my understanding is the intent is to absolutely include the needs of charter schools in the bond.
That's good, and we understand it's a placeholder, but it does explicitly list, the school districts and community colleges and
well, when you read the
county
analysis,
offices.
it lists $500 million for charter schools. But if you go to the bill, I think what's clear is the bill's been gutted so that we have a placeholder vehicle and we can fill in the amounts later.
I believe the $500 million in the analysis, isn't that from the 06?
Right, but all I'm saying is I just wanted to clarify that that's demonstrating the author's intent as the bill moves forward, and we fill in amounts in all the areas to be sure that we include money for charter schools as well as traditional schools.
Sure, and we certainly appreciate that consideration and hope to keep on working on that.
All right,
thank you.
And some of you know. Paid a great deal of attention to the budget, and there's no doubt that debt service is one of the stressors on the budget, and we're going to have to take a look at, what we should fund through state general obligation bonds and to incur more debt service. But education is an arm of state government. We have an obligation to educate our children. Education is truly, I believe, the real economic engine that we have of this state, and the reason we have industries like aerospace and technology and biotechnology is because of the intellectual capital we have, and you have to have quality facilities to be able to provide a quality education. So I think general obligation bonds for school priorities should remain a priority for the people of the state of California, and that is an absolutely correct use of general obligation bonds for the state. So I support this. I'd like to move the bill, and I'd like to thank you for moving it forward. I don't know exactly where the governor is going to be given his budget that just came out in terms of all the competing priorities on the ballot, but I think our passing this today is a statement that we recognize that we have an obligation, that we have, significant need that remains out there with our schools within the state of California, that we have an obligation to provide adequate facilities and be a partner in funding them, a partner with developers for new schools, a partner with school districts for modernizing existing schools. And so, we need to move this forward, and we'll see the path it takes.
Thank you, Ms. Buchanan.
There's a motion. Second. Are you seconding it? And a comment. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Norby. Well, first of all, I want to commend the author. I think this is one of those legacy bills that really encompasses the vision of the chair in terms of her attempts to make sure that we have a funding source for all of the programs that we've seen through here. I think this, of all the committees I've sat on, I think this committee has had the largest volume of bills because the need is so great. I had a clarifying question. I know that one of the inconsistencies that the bill seeks to attempt to clarify is the previous requirement of a career technical advisory committee to the middle school and the elementary school levels. I think in the LA Unified School District's letter, they indicated that they didn't think such an advisory committee was required of either of both elementary and middle school projects. And I was wondering, in the analysis, it seemed to indicate that the career technical component is integral to middle and high school, but not to elementary. So could you clarify, is there an inconsistency between the support letter of the school district and the analysis, or is there, as an advocate for career technical education, I think that advisory component is important, but I think it's important to distinguish which one it's necessary for.
Right. This question comes up a lot in the State Allocation Board, and the way the bill is stated, it's strictly for elementary schools. Pardon me? Elementary schools are exempt from it, and it's for high schools and middle schools. And I think there are districts who have programs that might stretch both through middle school to high school, and we want to be sure to be connected with this advisory committee as they move forward. But it has been always called into question at the State Allocation Board whether this should be included for elementary schools, and we just believe we want to clear up the code on that and say that the elementary schools are exempt.
Well, I think the disparity was middle schools.
Right. And I think
the bill seems to say
we're trying to clear it up to say that middle and high schools would be included.
And the school district.
Eric Bach again with Los Angeles Unified. Our reference to the middle school is that they're only just sometimes middle schools, and to some of Brownlee's, you've got a connection between some high school programs where you've got middle schools and high schools. So we can see the need for a career tech in that kind of an arrangement, but it's not consistently every middle school has a career tech education program, a single middle school. So it creates some confusion at the State Allocation Board level in the filing of applications. So we thought some clarity and clean that up. We have no preference. If middle school is a trouble in moving the bill along, we can certainly live without that. But certainly from the starting point, elementary needs to be addressed. But we just raised the middle school because it's not always necessary to have a career education program in a middle school. That's all.
Okay. Thanks for that clarification.
Others, yes. Mr. Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just real briefly, I've got a problem. I realize it's a vehicle, and this is the way we get it to the Senate with that big old blank in there, but I have real trouble voting for a vehicle that could come back to us with a very significant price tag. In fact, probably will come back to us with a very significant price tag. I'll take a look at it when it comes back. I will note, for the record, the analysis from the committee does talk about the state's poor credit rating, and no question we have one. It seems to me that, going further down the line of more bond indebtedness when, as is clear, there's like $49 billion in already authorized but unissued general obligation bonds out there, and there's the Prop, I guess it's 1E funds. I'm not convinced we need this, but I certainly am very uncomfortable with a big old blank that I know will be at some point, 6, 7, 8 figures when it comes back to us. So, and in respect to our credit rating, I'm going to have to go no on this one.
Other comments? One of my colleagues said that education is a basic mission of the state, and that's true. Feeding our families is a basic mission of any head of a household. But if you're using your Visa card to feed your family and buy groceries, and you wind up paying a lot of that back simply in interest, then most of the money's not going for food. A lot of it's going for interest payments, and you ought to find some cash flow to do it. So I am also uncomfortable with the level of bond indebtedness as well. Vote? Roll call? I'm sorry. Go ahead and close.
Just a very
Your
brief
final
close.
pitch. Yes, go ahead.
Again, just to reiterate, and I thank Ms. Buchanan for her comments, this is a vehicle, and this is the year where we have to look at our bond indebtedness and make some decisions, and so this is a vehicle to keep education in the discussion, and I certainly agree with Ms. Buchanan that this is a vehicle that sort of represents how many believe that education should be a priority in the state and to continue to invest in our school infrastructure so our children have a safe learning environment, and this is also a mechanism for the state to invest in and to create jobs in the future, but understanding what all the challenges are within the state. This vehicle moves forward, hopefully will move forward so we can continue to have those conversations, and with that I would respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you. The motion is to pass on to the Appropriations Committee. Roll, please.
Brownlee?
Aye.
Brownlee, aye. Norby?
No.
Norby, no. Amiano? Amiano, aye. Buchanan? Buchanan, aye. Butler? Butler, aye. Carter? Carter, aye. Ing?
Aye.
Ing, aye. Gaines? Gaines, no. Halderman? Aye. Halderman, aye. Wagner? No. Wagner, no. Williams? 7.
All right. It's out.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
AB 1199, I believe, is next.
Yes, 1199. This bill authorizes school districts to extend the term of appointment on a local bond citizens oversight committee from 2 2-year terms to 3 2-year terms. It makes sense to have members oversee the life of a project, which in many cases is definitely more than 4 years. This bill will also alleviate the need for districts to seek and the state board to process waivers that continually come towards the department. This bill is supported by the Superintendent of Public Instruction and the Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association and the California League of Bond Oversight Committee. So let it be noted that there are occasions under this roof where we can work together, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Those in support.
Mr. Chairman, members, David Wolf here with the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, and it just goes to show anybody can bat 500 with the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. And we are in support of the bill today. I also want to say I am wearing a couple of different hats today, obviously as the legislative director at Howard Jarvis, but also as a board member of the California League of Bond Oversight Committees. CalBOC is a registered 501c3, the point and purpose of which is to educate and train local bond oversight committee members in their roles and responsibilities to engage in oversight on Prop 39 bonds. Next to taxes, education issues are very important to me. This is a board I've been associated with for 2.5 years now, and just happy to be able to articulate their support position as well. We're just pleased and thankful that this will lead to added transparency of these Prop 39 bonds and result in more responsible use of taxpayer dollars. So for those reasons, we're in support. Thank you.
Monique Ramos on behalf of State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tom Torlakson. The superintendent is happy to support this for two reasons. He thinks it will improve the ability of oversight committees to see a construction process all the way through. As the chair has pointed out, it often takes more than 4 years to actually build a school facility site. In addition, it will also alleviate some of the waivers that have gone before State Board to extend term limits for 2 years. Thank you.
Others in support? Any opposition? Questions, comments from our panel? Moved and seconded. My only comment would be I've never supported term limits for any office. I could hardly do so, having served 18 years on the Fullerton City Council. And where term limits do exist, I believe they should be extended and loosened. This does that, so I can support it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And with that, I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Great.
Brownlee?
Aye.
Brownlee, aye. Norby?
Aye.
Norby, aye. Amiano? Aye. Amiano, aye. Buchanan? Buchanan, aye. Butler? Butler, aye. Carter? Carter, aye. Ing? Ing, aye. Gaines? Gaines, aye. Halderman? Halderman, aye. Wagner? Wagner, aye. Williams? It's out.
It's out.
Great. Last bill is AB 1246. And I bring this bill before you, a bill that seeks to improve the state's instructional materials adoption process. AB 1246 allows school districts and requires the superintendent of public instruction, instead of the Instructional Quality Commission, which parenthetically used to be the Curriculum Commission but has now been renamed, to recommend to the State Board instructional materials for adoption. The Instructional Quality Commission retains its role in the framework development process and will be involved in the review of reports of findings and instructional materials, but only when the State Board requests it. The Commission will also serve as an appeals panel in case of disputes. AB 1246 additionally provides greater transparency in the process by requiring specified information be provided to school districts regarding the adopted instructional materials and by providing additional opportunities for public input and review. To this end, AB 1246 extends the length of the adoption cycle to 8 years for all subject areas. Part of the bill also incorporates suggestions made by the State Board to provide for an ongoing and rolling adoption process, and to this end, AB 1246 extends the length of the adoption cycle to 8 years for all subject areas and allows for materials to be submitted at any time during that time frame. However, in order to address cost concerns that may result, this bill also allows the Department of Education to assess a fee on publishers if materials are submitted after a specified time frame. The provisions in this bill may sound familiar to you, as they were originally in AB 250 that I authored and signed by the governor last year. I amended the instructional materials provision out of AB 250 per the request of the administration to allow for more time to consider these pieces. My intent is to continue working with the administration and my sponsor of the bill as we move forward. In closing, this bill sets up an improved process for the adoption of K through 8 instructional materials, so when our fiscal climate allows it, instructional materials are adopted in a more streamlined and inclusive manner and results in more flexibility and choices for school districts. And with me today, I have Janice Warden-Washington from the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tom Torlakson. See, now I can say that, and you don't have to say that. The sponsor of the bill.
Go ahead. And anyone else in support of the bill is welcome to speak.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And as stated by Assemblymember Brownlee, I am Janice Warden on behalf of the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, the sponsor of the bill. And as we know, the State Board of Education adopted the Common Core State Standards in August of 2010. However, with the moratorium on the adoption of instructional materials, the next likely State Board adoption process of materials will not take place until sometime after the 1st of July 2015. With this in mind, AB 1246 will propose to make changes to the instructional materials adoption process to streamline the process and give school districts the opportunity to participate in the review of instructional materials. The State Superintendent of Public Instruction and the Department of Education are committed to continuing to work with the author and the State Board in ensuring that students receive access to the materials that reflect the recently adopted standards. I have with me Dr. Tom Adams, the Director of the Curriculum Frameworks and Instructional Resources Division at the department, to answer questions that may come up. Thank you so much.
Yes, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, Isabel Garcia on behalf of the California Teachers Association. We urge your strong support for this bill. We support the reforms in this bill, especially the school district option. We think that the classroom teachers in the districts they know their students, they know the needs that they need for instructional materials, and to give them the opportunity to select instructional materials and recommend to the State Board, we think is an important reform. And we think the goal is, again, instead of having a limited list of instructional materials, to have a comprehensive list in all content areas instead of just 2 content areas. So overall, we're very enthusiastic about the bill and urge your strong support for the bill.
Laura Preston with the Association of California School Administrators. We too are in support. We think this bill needs to move forward so that we can continue to have the dialogue around Common Core and the reforms there and upcoming future assessment and accountability reforms as well. So we encourage your support of this measure.
Is this working? Good afternoon, Martha Zaragoza Diaz, representing Californians Together Coalition, and we heartily support this bill. We believe that it will provide instructional materials that better meet the needs of the students by the school districts, and that it contains the proper protections. Instructional materials would still have to follow the approved criteria, and the State Board of Education will still be required to approve the final instructional materials list. So we really support this bill. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Brian Rivas on behalf of the California School Boards Association. We're supportive of this measure, and we look forward to working with Ms. Brownlee and her staff to get to a full support position.
Others wishing to speak? Anyone in opposition? Comments, questions from our panel? Or a motion? Moved and seconded. Summation, please.
Good bill. We still have some work to do, and ask for your aye vote.
Okay. Motion is to pass to Appropriations Committee.
Brownlee?
Aye.
Brownlee, aye. Norby?
Nope.
Norby, no. Amiano?
Aye.
Amiano, aye. Buchanan? Buchanan, aye. Butler? Butler, aye. Carter? Carter, aye. Ing? Ing, aye. Gaines? Gaines, no. Halderman? Halderman, no. Wagner? Wagner, no. Williams? That's 6 votes. That's that.
Okay.
So that last bill had 6 votes, so that bill is out, and that concludes our hearing for the day. And are we okay, Bob? Or everything, we're all covered? No, I'm covered. Everything's covered. With that, we will adjourn.